Georgia goes to play Tennessee in a couple of days in Knoxville, but tonight and today I'm going to talk to you about the 2001 game, the Hobnail boot game. I got a chance to talk to a lot of the former players about that moment, and I'm linking down below a story that I did that we just published over on dogpost.com, and it's the inside story of the Georgia Bulldogs Hobnail boot win over the Tennessee Vols. The thing to remember about 2001 was it was the first season of Mark Richt. We're about 3 weeks away from 9/11, which had really shaped the beginning of um, the college football season and the mood in America. And Georgia was trying to figure out and find its way. And that was easier said than done. I mean, Corey Phillips and David Green had been in a big quarterback competition. David had come out on top, but Corey Phillips had played a little bit. It seemed pretty clear that David was the guy. And the Tennessee game, if the Arkansas game didn't solidify it, the Tennessee game did. And the first thing that happened that game was that Tennessee got out to a 14-3 lead. It looked like the Vols were just going to kind of do what they had done for so long against Georgia, which was kind of win in going away fashion. But in 2001, as the game went on, Georgia scored with a Damian Gary touchdown. And then about the next offensive possession, Georgia scored and took the lead 17-14. The game was on CBS at noon, and Larry Munson's going crazy during all of this. Georgia had beaten Tennessee the year before in Athens. That was the only time that I think in school history Georgia fans had rushed the field after a game. And nobody really gave Georgia a shot in 2001. They were 11.5 point underdogs. They had lost every game except the 2000 game from 1988 on. So it had been since the 80s that Georgia had done well, had beaten Tennessee. And it was kind of it's kind of strange because in the fall, particularly up there in Knoxville, it can get kind of cold and but still the sky is completely blue, and that was what that day was like in Knoxville. And of course, the question becomes from a lot of Georgia people, where does Hobnail Boot rank in the pantheon of Larry Munson calls? And at the time, people started comparing it to Lindsey Scott. I think over time, it's become as important as Lindsey Scott. I don't know if you can say it's more important than Lindsey Scott, but it was an extremely important call. Meanwhile, Veron Haynes, who had walked on at Georgia and fought his way onto the field, was playing a little bit, but Musa Smith was Georgia's primary running back at the time. Eventually, Musa would get hurt, and Veron would have to do and Veron would have to take it over. But that play was something that was set up by Randy McMichael. And that's the part that is sort of forgot in Georgia lore. Uh, Randy went on to a long career in the NFL, like a decade almost. Guy from Fort Valley. And Tennessee trailed the whole game. They were down 20-17 going into the final 2 minutes of the game. And with 141 to go, they hit a very long screen for a touchdown. Place about falls down. Larry Munson's distraught as usual. John Stinchcomb said that I'll read you the exact quote from John when I can find it. He said, when Tennessee scored on that screen, it was deafening. Uh, it felt like the field was vibrating. It was so loud. You couldn't hear anything, obviously. That place gets crazy loud. The play was a real dagger. And at the time, Tennessee, their sideline was opposite the press box. That's not the case anymore. So you could see the reaction of the players and the coaches and everything as I think it was Travis Stevens took off down the sideline. Um, Tennessee, I was certain, had won the game. I mean, it felt as certain as when Georgia had won the game in 2003 at LSU with a similar type play with Tyson Browning. But um, Tennessee made a mistake that a lot of people up there will really never forgive Phil Fulmer for, or at least they won't in their deepest, darkest memories won't forgive him for, which was Tennessee went with a squib kick and the ball. They were scared to death of Georgia's return game, and that was actually something that Phil Fulmer talked about after the game. You know, they'd already given up a touchdown to Damian Gary, and they were worried that another long kick would get the Vols right in or get the Dogs right in position. Problem was Tennessee kicked a squib, and Randy McMichael stuck his giant paws out, got a hold of it at the 34, and ran 7 yards to the 41. So all of a sudden, Georgia's in, midfield, just right off the bat, and that was because of Randy doing what he did. So they get the ball at midfield, and the next play was beautiful. And if you're wondering why I don't show these plays, I don't have the copyright for them. So you can find it online, and you can find Larry Munson online. You don't need me to play it over the top. Damian Gary runs this like circle route or something to where he comes out of the backfield and almost literally does a circle to the middle of the field. David Green hits him, and he runs forward a little bit further. Now everybody at Tennessee is freaking out because not only does Georgia have the ball at midfield, they're getting it on the Tennessee side of things. They're at the Tennessee 46, and there's plenty of time left. I mean, it was a 13-yard play. Then Randy McMichael made about as good as play in the next two plays as you could get. Georgia has one timeout. They're still running it down the field, trying to get it down the field real quick. David wound up with 300 yards passing, and he throws the ball to McMichael for 26 yards. Boom. They are in very good position. They're at the 20, and Randy McMichael has just made a one-handed catch. I mean, it was amazing play by Randy getting the ball down the field and catching it and moving it on down the field. Georgia doesn't. I think the next play was Randy Michael again gets the ball down to Larry Munson said that it was a great David Green back to throw, and we catch it on the 7. He's screaming. Georgia actually had the ball at the 6-yard line at that point, and they call a timeout. This is where Mark Richt's mastery, I guess you could say, came into play. And this was the part of Mark that people loved. He was calm completely. And he said, "Hey, we're doing P44 Haynes, and that's it." And he told David Green, "If they're in quarters, which is a coverage, you'll know you've got it." So David in shotgun, I mean, they're smelling the end zone paint, the checkerboard, you could smell it. And David turns to Veron and says, "They're in quarters, V. They're in quarters." So Veron knew instantly that they had the play they wanted. Tennessee sucks up on the snap. Before the snap, CBS catches Mark Richt saying, "We got it, we got it." And they sure did. David fakes it to Veron. He sneaks out. Linebacker sucks up because of the fake. Touchdown. Right in the middle of the checkerboard. And from that point forward, Georgia was not the same. And from that point forward, Tennessee's never been the same. That was so rarely in sports do we get a moment where, like, it's the Battle of Midway, for instance, where you don't know who's going to win necessarily. And all of a sudden, immediately, the whole thing changes. Tennessee has not won the SEC since. Georgia has gone on to win 3 conference championships, played for a few national championships, played in one national championship game, won Sugar Bowls, Rose Bowls, Peach, etc. Tennessee played for the conference championship a week after beating the Gators in the Swamp in Steve Spurrier's final season at Florida. Nobody knew it at the time. It was a shocking result that was delayed until December because of 9/11. A week after that game, a huge win for Tennessee, playing Rocky Top in the Swamp all night long. They go to Atlanta and play LSU, a team that they thought, and I think all of us thought, they would beat. But Nick Saban and LSU is the only team in the time that the SEC has gone to divisions, that has won the SEC with 3 conference losses. And that's what they did to Tennessee that night, blocking them from a chance to play for the national championship. Phil Fulmer was never the same. Tennessee was never the same. And Georgia was never the same. From that point forward, Georgia's run from 2001 until today, really, but certainly from 2001 to 2007 was one of the best runs in school history. In 2002, they go on. Well, later in that year, in 2001, they go on to beat Georgia Tech for the first time in 3 years. And well, that would have been 4 straight wins for Tech had Georgia not beaten them in Atlanta, and that was because of Ron Haynes and his run in the football. But that moment was so critical, and it really was Larry's last great call. Um, when they won the Sugar Bowl in 2002, there was no real one play. When they won the Sugar Bowl, when they won the conference championship in 2002, there was no one play. They had some great calls when Georgia upset LSU to win the conference championship in 2005. Maybe Tim Jennings interception return for a touchdown, but Hobnail boot really cinched it for the Dogs, Larry Munson, and it really exercised a decade of frustration from Georgia over the Vols, for Georgia over with the Vols. I very clearly remember. I'm going to tell 2 remembering stories, and then I'll let y'all go. Number one, I remember in 1998 uh, when Tennessee came to Georgia, and the band had small little sheets of paper that they had the number 8, I think it was, printed on it, and that was the 8th straight win the Vols had over Georgia, and they had the gall, the foresight, and the confidence to print those for the band to hold up at the end of that game. And then this is an anecdotal story, but after the 1998 game in Athens, I was trying to meet someone on the corner of Broad and Lumpkin, right across the street from from campus at Georgia. And a Tennessee fan came up to me and kept walking back and forth. And he was a drunk Tennessee law grad or grad student, one of the two. I knew he was in law at Tennessee was what I remember. And he said Georgia's never going to beat Tennessee ever. It's never going to happen. And when I think about that play in Knoxville and I think about Tennessee and the Vols, I think about his smugness and how certain he was that Georgia would never beat the Vols. I wonder where that guy is today and how much this has pained him to see Tennessee fall and Georgia win. He may have grown up in Atlanta and had enough of the Dogs through the years. He may have, there's any number of, things, but I remember both those moments very clearly. And Hobnail Boot was a seminal moment. You don't get a lot of those, but it was a moment in time that projected where one team was going and the other was not. Thanks for reading. Thanks for listening. Make sure you're reading down below the inside story of Hobnail Boot at Georgia.